My name is Elendea Profer-Teasley. I am a Russian scholar, Russian publisher, spent part of my life in the Soviet Union and among Soviet people, and now among Russian exiles. What has moved me to make this my first TikTok video is a lecture I gave last January 2024 at Duke University through the good offices of the wonderful Professor Edna Andrews. A group of students fought their way through a snow emergency in Durham and came to a lecture despite the fact that the university was essentially closed. I chose to speak about totalitarianism for my own reasons, not because of what was going on in our country at the time. I underscore this. They came for their reasons. So the sound was terrible, or I would be posting a link to my lecture. But maybe it's just as well. So I began by saying what totalitarianism is and what it is not. So Hannah Arendt is our main authority on it, but she was speaking about her experiences in Nazi Germany and as a stateless person in the 30s. That is not all quite so relevant now. And I don't agree with her on everything, but she's a major thinker and a remarkable woman. I began by saying totalitarianism is not just someone telling you what to do. That would be a dictatorship. Totalitarianism is someone telling you what to think. That is quite a different matter. And now we are presented with this problem, especially in Russia. So in order to make the point about what totalitarians can do and not do, I talked about Robert Kaiser and his wife, Hannah Joplin Kaiser, sending a photographer with them across the Soviet Union, 11 time zones at the time, so that you keep in mind the enormous distances. And yet, there was only one way for a child to sleep in a nursery school, and that was to the right, on their hands, in a specific position. And everybody, as their photographer documented, slept the same way across the 11 time zones. So that's one example. Censorship, determination to control the kind of thoughts people had, that was all characteristic of the Soviet Union. And I had much firsthand experience of it. But now let's go to a different thing. My niece, Haley Calvin, in Goa, teaching Chinese and many other nations English over Zoom. So she's teaching English over Zoom to Russians, to Indians, and to many Chinese. She is in their living rooms. So imagine, if you will, a screen, a TV screen filled with little squares like Zoom, all pregnant with possibility. And each one of those families, some are rich, some are poor, they have scraped together the money to pay Haley. An American company that's half American, half Chinese, is the middleman, taking the yuan and converting them to dollars to pay Haley. That will become important later. So she's teaching. They're very happy with her. She's very intelligent. She's very charming. She's teaching not just English, but also how to socialize if you're an introspective kind of nerd from the technological world, and how to socialize with Americans. All of this is worth paying for, and they are paying for it. They are paying for it, say, 10 lessons ahead. When one day, after a very good run of a long period, she gets a notice from one of her clients that says, you're going to have to wind up these lessons. They buy 10 lessons, say, in advance. Because on a certain date, we are no longer going to be able to see you and to deal with you and to learn from you. It turns out that Xi, the head of China, has decided to truncate all connections with foreign firms, especially American firms, and everything has to be done within 2 weeks. So Haley is like a race car driver. They're bringing her water, they're bringing her food. She's racing through these lessons for all these people. Imagine those 30 little squares on her screen. Finally, the last day comes, and she watches each one of those squares go black. One man did that. One man had the power over 1.5 billion people to make that happen on such a low level. My niece is a minor player. Her clients, it's a tiny group, and yet they all knew they had to obey. That is totalitarianism. The other story I told the Duke students was about my girlfriend who went to Rwanda this year. In Rwanda, she is a former federal judge. She thought she would be taken around Rwanda's judge areas by a graduate student or, some kind of intern. But no, it was an actual judge took her around. She said, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "The students could make a mistake in what they told you, and it would cost them dearly." Because it turns out Rwanda is now a totalitarian state. You are not allowed to criticize the government. Now, there are good reasons for this. After the massacres of the Hutu-Tutsi conflict, President Kagame decided there could be no Hutu, there could be no Tutsi, there could only be Rwandese, and that this had to be reinforced every way it could be. Nevertheless, this is a totalitarian state. All right, so I get to the end of the lecture. I tell them various things about my life in the Soviet Union and how controlled everything was and how afraid everybody was of speaking to foreigners, of saying something out of turn. And I got questions from the students. The most interesting came from 2 students. One was a Vietnamese girl, and she said, "What you're describing in Soviet Russia sounds terribly much like what my parents described in Vietnam as the North took over." She said, "Do you think they learned from each other?" And I said, yes, they did. They learned lots of things from each other, including architecture, including police procedures, many, many things. The other question came from a boy from a Chinese family. His family is from the mainland. He said, "My parents say that she is now a dictator. I'm thinking that maybe they're exaggerating. What do you think?" And I said, "He is a dictator. One man made this happen to my niece and her clients, just like one man made the decision to go into Ukraine and attack it." These are all signs of totalitarianism, although Putin is not trying to control exactly what everybody thinks yet, but he's well on his way with his textbook endeavors. So I found these questions and these students to be very depressed. One of the main questions from the American students was, "Do you think that we are on path to totalitarianism now?" I said, "No, because we are a very diverse country, an enormous country. Each state feels like it's a sovereign nation. But there are bad signs ahead, and we have to fight for what we believe in. And if you believe in democracy, I think you need You need to think about what you want to do. But what we do have now is not totalitarianism, it's an oligarchy. And that is the end of my first video. Thank you very much.